Great to be with you this morning. If we haven't met before, my name is Brett. I'm one of the pastors here. If you're new, there are two Bretts, and so if that's getting confusing, there are two of us. He'll be up later in this service. But I'm the pastor of discipleship and operations, which basically means I handle a whole bunch of the behind-the-scenes kind of systems and stuff like that. And today we're preaching. And we are we're in the last few weeks of our series through the book of Revelation. It seems like not that long ago that we started it, but it was actually like pretty well a year ago that we started this series, and we are just weeks away from its conclusion. And the really cool thing is we're getting into the part of Revelation that's like really, really like positive and uplifting and really like kind of cool and exciting, but we're not quite there yet. This part is positive and is exciting, but there's a bit of digging left to do today. But if you're just joining us new, if you haven't been tracking along, you can go back and watch kind of the catalog of sermons. But to kind of catch us all up a little bit, because it's been a while, Revelation is the last book in the Bible, and it is written by John. John is on a prison island, and he gets this vision, and in the vision he's told to write down what he sees, and then to send it out to the seven churches, and they're listed. But Revelation is a book, and it's a type of literature called apocalyptic. And basically it's an old kind of literature, which we don't have a lot of references to today. But basically what it is that it uses pictures to help communicate to us greater like reality that sits below the surface. So Revelation tries to capture ideas that just simple like words can't convey accurately. So John kind of paints these pictures of what he's seeing that then from which we can interpret the kind of the greater truth or reality that he's trying to get across to us. So because of this, Revelation is often viewed as a tricky book to read because it's not super plain. Like you can read stuff in the Bible where it's like, do this, don't do that. Revelation's not so clear. It uses pictures. It takes some interpreting. It takes some imagining. So to kind of catch us up, John gets this vision. He writes to the churches. And the purpose of the book is to encourage churches that are being oppressed in the cultural moment that they live in, that are trying to learn how to navigate following Jesus in a culture that is opposed to the things of God. Trying to navigate living life as Christians in a world full of chaos and sin and evil, but also just full of different ideas, different ideologies, different political influences, different social influences, different priorities, different kind of systems and structures all around them. And they're in the Roman Empire and they're being persecuted. So it's not an easy time to be a Christian. And this church needs to be encouraged. And that is one of the points of this book, is to encourage the church. But luckily for us, again, Revelation, apocalyptic, symbolism, revealing, the number 7 is significant. It means completion, wholeness. There's this idea, and though this letter is written to 7 churches, it's actually meant not just for those 7 churches at that time, but for all churches at all time. Which means that the book of Revelation is not just meant to be an encouragement to the church that received it 2,000 years ago. It's also meant to be an encouragement to us today. An encouragement to know that sin and evil and the chaos we see in our world is being dealt with and will be dealt with. But it's also an exhortation to kind of ask this question that in the end, where does your allegiance lie? Revelation kind of pushes us in some ways into a corner of having to decide who gets my loyalty. And it paints all these different pictures of, does it sit with the lamb or with the beast or the dragon? Does my allegiance lie with God or does it lie with political influences? Does my allegiance lie with Jesus or does it lie with my friends and my social circles? Where does my allegiance lie? Who gets my loyalty? So this letter is sent to the churches. Then we get this kind of miraculous kind of vision into heaven. We get a glimpse into heaven into this beautiful worship scene. If that was back in like Revelation 4 and 5. And then it changes a little bit, and we start to see these warning signs. One of the promises of Revelation is that God will deal with evil. All of the brokenness, the disease, famine, hurt, pain, death, destruction, all are things that God in the end is going to deal with. Which is really good news unless you've closely tied yourself to those things. God dealing with sin and destruction and evil is really good news unless we have kind of bound ourselves or found our loyalties in evil and sin. So God starts dealing with this stuff, but he does it progressively, slowly, in incremental steps, so that we would have the best chance to be able to see. Revelation means an unveiling. It means to see that we do actually have to make a choice. That in the end we can be on the side of the Lamb, or we can be swept away with sin when God deals with it. Jesus does this progressively so that we all have a chance, so that we can make an informed decision. He's been giving warning signs, and it's been kind of leading to this climactic moment where we actually find ourselves today. We today are kind of looking at the passage, and in some ways is like the climax of God dealing and ridding the world of evil. A lot's going on here. And as we dive in this morning, there's one phrase that I want us to kind of hold on to today. And it's simple. I think you'll be able to remember it. It's the phrase, look up. Can somebody say, look up? Excellent. You guys got it already. If you remember anything, just remember that. It'll do you well in the future. Let's dive in. Revelation of Jesus Christ, chapter 19, starting in verse 11. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems or crowns. And he has a name written that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them or shepherd them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God the Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Then the tone shifts a little bit in verse 17. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and with a loud voice he called to all the birds that fly directly overhead, Come, gather for the great supper of God, to eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men, the flesh of horses and their riders, the flesh of all men, both free and slave, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against him who is seated on the horse and against his army. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who in its presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped its image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur, and the rest were slain by the sword that came from the mouth of him who is seated on the horse, and all the birds were gorged with their flesh. Quite the passage. If anybody ever asks you, do you want to preach Revelation 19? The answer is no. But we've seen some of these passages already in this book. These kind of graphic images that almost feel out of place in the Bible. It's like the Bible's not really a kid's book. As much as we sometimes we let our kids read the Bible, it's not a kid's book. It's graphic, and this image is meant to cause us kind of be a little taken aback. And I think the graphic imagery here is trying to help us better understand the weighty significance of what is being communicated. And again, this image that John is painting, he's trying to convey to us truth, and he's doing it by painting a picture. So it's not saying that this is exactly word for word what's going to happen, but he's like, here is the picture. Within it is all the things that you need to see in order to understand what is coming. And so as we kind of sit in the tension of this passage a little bit, let's go right back to the top. It says that heaven was opened, but no, it says that I saw heaven opened. John sees heaven opens, and what does he see? He sees a rider. He sees a white horse with a rider, a warrior, riding in. And there are lots of details within this passage of Revelation that there is legitimately some debate on what exactly they represent. But on this piece here, there is no debate. In this scene in Revelation, the one who is riding in to rid the world of evil, the one who is riding in to deal with sin once and for all, to wipe the slate clean, this rider is Jesus. Nobody debates this fact. It's Jesus riding in, and this is the risen Jesus that came to earth, died, and was resurrected, and now seats at the right hand of the Father. It's that Jesus. We see him riding in. And immediately, he's given some characteristics. We get told a fair few things about this rider. And remember, John is trying to help us to get a picture for it, to be able to see, to be able to imagine who this person is. And some of it's familiar language. We've seen it before. It says that he is faithful and true. Back in chapter 3, we see the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation, when John is writing to the letter to the church in Laodicea. We've already seen this idea, this one who is just. He is faithful. You can have confidence in him. He deals with evil rightly. He doesn't ever get it wrong. He will deal with the brokenness of the world, and he'll do it as a just judge. He is faithful and true. Then we see this picture of his eyes are like a flame of fire, which is wild, but that goes back to chapter 1. It says, in the midst of the 7 lampstands is one whose eyes were like a flame of fire. We have these glimpses as to who Jesus is that are now being culminated in chapter 19, in this climactic moment in the book. It goes on and it says, on his head are many diadems or crowns. On his head are many crowns. Well, why is this significant? Crowns signify authority, so he's got a lot of authority. Yes, but it's even more significant if we remember back that the dragon is said to have 7 crowns, one for each of its 7 heads. The beast is said to have 10 crowns, one for each of its 10 horns. And I think what's trying to be conveyed to us here is this picture of Jesus is he has infinite crowns. He has many crowns, which is significant when contrasted with the finite, limited, not whole amount of crowns that is held by the evil representatives in the book of Revelation. The ones who represent chaos in this book have a finite authority, have a finite sovereignty, which pales when contrasted with the infinite, overwhelming, awe-inspiring authority and sovereignty of Jesus. One commentator put it, it's as though he has many spheres of sovereignty under a single Lord. That he holds all authority. That no matter what authority or rule that it seems like evil can have, Jesus is above it. His authority is immeasurable. And we pause here for a moment because there is a picture forming. Remember, John is trying to get us to see something. And it's forming this picture of Jesus, this righteous judge, this one whose eyes are like a flame of fire. It's like he sees all things. And he has all authority. He carries it all with him. John is trying to see that this Jesus is a ruling Jesus. This is an in-control Jesus. This is a guy who, when he walks into the room, everything else listens kind of Jesus. He's painting this picture. We're starting to get this picture that Jesus is even greater than we thought. Because we have the Jesus in the Gospels, but he's being revealed to an even greater measure here in Revelation 19. We have the picture of Jesus as the lamb standing as though slain earlier in the book, but now we're seeing Jesus revealed to an even greater measure. We've had all these glimpses that are now being put together and showing that he's even greater than we thought. It goes on to say that he has a name written that no one knows but himself. Interesting things there you can go find out on your own time. It says that he's clothed in a robe dipped in blood. We'll come back to that. And it says the name by which he is called is the Word of God. And if any of you have spent some time reading the Gospels, that language might be familiar. And I think it's significant. We're going to come to it in a moment. It goes on to say that there's a whole army following him. It then goes on to say that there's a sword that comes from his mouth. We would believe that this means that the means by which he's going to carry out what he's going to do will be through his mouth, his voice. But this image becomes greater when we recognize what it means that this figure is the Word of God. In John 1, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God." And this is important. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. All things were made through him. When John is titling Jesus as the Word of God, we are getting this picture of the one who at the beginning of time spoke creation into existence. We're getting this picture of this one who has an authority to speak life from nothing. This is the one who everything we see around us, this entire world, was breathed out by Jesus. This is the Jesus that is being revealed to us in Revelation. The Jesus that with his voice, all changes. That with his voice, when he speaks, all else has to listen. It's the same voice that calmed the storm in the Gospels. It's the same voice that when he said, "It is finished," accomplished on the cross what no man could have ever accomplished. And it's the same voice that when he speaks, he will rid the world of all that is broken. The voice of Jesus is the most incredible, powerful force we could imagine. Nothing can stand before it. His voice holds all power. It's his divine, creation-altering authority. This revealed Jesus is meant to be awe-inspiring. It's a picture of Jesus that as we see it, we're meant to almost like I can't even really look at that. It's terrifying, but it's beautiful. It's significant. I don't even it's meant to be this jaw-dropping picture of Jesus. The power that it exudes, the authority he exudes over all creation, the physical, the spiritual. And to pause for a moment here, this picture of Jesus, when we're able to look up and see this picture of Jesus, it puts a lot of things in perspective. Because there are things in your life and in my life that if we're being really honest, we don't have control over. We face things in our life where it's like, this is out of my control. And that's often a pretty stressful experience. This picture of Jesus is the one who is fully in control. The one that can bring from death life. The one that can take disorder and create order out of it. The one that can take chaos and tell it to be still. That is the Jesus that we follow. That is the Jesus that we can interact with and engage with. That is the Jesus that's being revealed to us in Revelation. And there is hope for us that when life feels chaotic, when life feels out of our control, there's one that we can turn to, that with his voice, all creation has to listen. That's a pretty powerful resource that you and I have access to when we've chosen to follow Jesus. It's good to be on his side. And what's incredible is this Jesus, when he speaks, the war is, in a sense, is over. This section of Revelation is really interesting because we start to see this picture unfolding as Jesus is being magnified. In the same breath, evil isn't as powerful as it looks anymore. As Jesus gets magnified, sin and evil gets right-sized. What do I mean here? Let's go to verse 19. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against him who is seated on the horse and against his army. I picture reading this like in all those in movies when you get to the point in like the last 10 minutes when there's like two armies and they're about to kind of have the climactic clash at the end, and it's not really clear which army's going to win, and they're on both sides of the field, and then it's like go time and they start rushing in. It's like that's kind of the scene I imagine when I read this. It's like all evil forces, everyone that's basically said, my allegiance is with the beast and the dragon. My allegiance is with social and political powers. My allegiance is with evil and corruption. When my allegiance is there, it's like that all who have embodied that, represented in the beast and the dragon, they're like preparing for war. They've all got their swords out. They're standing on the edge of the field, ready to go, looking significant. And what we see, it's almost like in a movie when it flickers and then all of a sudden it's over. It's kind of like that. They gathered to make war against him who is seated on the horse. And then in verse 20, and the beast was captured along with the false prophet. We get this, Revelation has been leading us to this point of this final battle. And then we get there and all of a sudden, and the beast was captured. And along with it, the false prophet who had deceived those who had received the mark of the beast. Where's the war? Where's the battle? I think there's some clues for us in this passage. We skipped over the line where it says that the rider, Jesus, his robe was dipped in blood. And there is some debate on what exactly this means. But there's good evidence to suggest that this blood is actually Jesus' blood. And it's the blood that he shed on the cross. One of the marking characteristics of Jesus when he rides into this final battle to rid the world of evil once and for all, the marker that marks him, the thing that when you look at him you see it, it's a white robe, it's been dipped in blood, it is obvious, is the mark of the victory that had already been won on the cross. We believe that when Jesus came to earth, lived a sinless life, and then died on the cross to take the penalty for your sin and my sin upon himself, and then died and was resurrected, defeating death in the grave, that in that moment, 2,000 years ago, death and sin was defeated once and for all. The final battle, in some sense, is not the final battle in Revelation. The final battle is the battle that was won on the cross. Just so you don't just take my word for it. One commentator says it this way: Jesus, the warrior, rides to the final battle, which is never fought because he already fought it on the cross. His robe is already dipped in his own blood. Jesus rides out and doesn't actually need to wage war in the way that we think he would have to, because evil has already been stripped of its power. And it doesn't matter how strong it looks. It doesn't matter how enticing it looks. It doesn't matter how dramatically it portrays itself. It has already been stripped of its power. So when Jesus steps in, all that he needs is the sword of his voice, and it is over. This scene is much more a battle report, a report of casualties, than it is a massive battle in the traditional sense that we would think of it. And the piece that I think is important for us to recognize is, one, there's the obvious question of which side are you on? And we've spent a lot of time throughout this series talking about that. Do we want to be on the side of Jesus, or do we want to be on the side of the beast? This is giving us one more example of it's pretty obvious the side that we want to be on. And that's an invitation that Jesus gives to all of us, that we can accept and embrace his forgiveness in our lives. We can embrace and accept his death and resurrection on the cross, and his blood covers us for all of our sin, for all of our shortcoming. We can join with him and be on his side in the end. That's an invitation for all of us. Revelation is trying to help us see that we do have a choice, and we do have to make it. But the other thing that's getting presented in this scenario is that evil looks really good, looks really significant, looks really powerful. Sin looks really powerful, really enticing, until it is contrasted with the glory and the might and the sovereignty of the risen Jesus portrayed in all of his glory. Sin gets right-sized. Evil pales in comparison. It is literally nothing when faced with the King of Kings. And by knowing what's unveiled, revelation means an unveiling, by knowing what is unveiled or revealed in its full picture in the end, by knowing that's coming, there will come a time and a place where all will be revealed, where all will be made right, where the reality of Jesus' victory on the cross will be made plain to everyone. That is coming. But Revelation gives us a picture. It gives us a glimpse into that so that we can live in the reality of his victory today. You and I can live in the reality of Christ's victory on the cross today. We do not need to wait for the final battle to come. We can live in it now. Paul knew this when he was writing in Romans 6. We know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. Sin would no longer have a hold of us. Sin would no longer have power in our life. It lost that on the cross. The power of sin has to be right-sized by more accurately seeing the power of Jesus. The beauty of this is that many of us feel stuck in a tension where it's like, there is sinful things in me. I do fall short. There are things in my life that aren't how I wish they were. The message here is not that it's like a try harder to overcome those things. The message is actually to look up. That when we begin to see Jesus more accurately for who he is, when he begins to get our attention, everything else starts to pale in comparison. The chaos of the world doesn't always go away, but it gets right-sized when contrasted with the glory of the risen Jesus. Colossians 2 helps us see this as well. And you who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made you alive together with him, having forgiven us all our trespasses, by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and the authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them. He put all of the things that can have control of your life, all of the things that you can feel like bound by, all the things you can feel stuck in. He disarmed them. He removed them of their power by triumphing over them on the cross. So what does this mean for us today? Well, in simple terms, it's refuse to give power to sin. The power sin holds is the power that we think that it has. There is a sense that when we start to give sin and evil our attention, it does start to hold power. When it gets our focus, when it gets our eyes, when we start to look down here, it does start to have influence in our lives. The problem with focusing here is it's really hard to focus here and also be focusing here at the same time. And there is something to this that's kind of intangible, but it's something that many of us have experienced. That when my focus is down here on the chaos of the world, when my focus is on the things that I don't understand, on the things that I don't feel like I have control over, on the things that are like robbing me of peace, when my focus is here, even if I'm like trying to figure it out and I'm like working on it, it's like when my focus is here, when this gets my attention, in here I start to experience a whole lot of tension. When my focus is down here, I notice my peace starting to go away. I stop being as hopeful. I stop being as optimistic. I start feeling unsure of myself. I start feeling like I might be stuck here forever. And when I'm down here, there's nothing really I can do to remove myself from some of these things. The only thing that I have left is to look up. And there is something miraculous that happens when Christ begins to get my attention. All that stuff starts to seem like it doesn't matter quite as much. I start to experience hope again. I start to experience peace in my life again. I start to experience a sense of purpose and belonging and value in my life again. And it's not like A plus B equals C type of situation. I think if we could all like perfectly connect all the dots, we'd all already be doing that. It's that the act of refocusing our eyes and giving him our attention is a faith step. And I'd be lying to say that if I said it's not supernatural. No, it is. There's something supernatural that happens when he begins to get our attention. I can't explain how that all works, but I know that it's true. And I think at the most climactic point in the book of Revelation, John goes well out of his way to paint a very specific picture of the person of Jesus. That though evil can seem powerful, though it can seem like it's having its way, though it can seem like it's in control, as soon as Jesus comes into the scene, it is made obvious that that is not the case. It is made obvious the victory has already been won on the cross. It's been made obvious that that is something that you and I can enter into today. And we do it by not trying harder, not just trying to get it right every time, but by directing our gaze and our attention to Jesus. It's amazing what shifts when we do that. In the end, all is revealed clearly. One commentator put it this way: one day he's simply going to pull back the curtain. He is going to make plain to the whole world what is true. And we're given this picture so that we can be encouraged to live in light of Jesus' victory in the end and live in it today. And it starts with adjusting our gaze. You see, you and I, we need to have a revelation of Jesus, a revealed picture, an unveiling of who he is. We need to be able to see him. But that's something that we actually have to want. And I believe today that if you ask God, help me to see you. Jesus, help me to see you more clearly today. I believe he will show himself to you. In preparation for this sermon, I was reading a little bit and I stumbled across a story of a lady named Helen Lemmel. Anybody ever heard of Helen Lemmel? I doubt it. There's only a few things written about her. We don't know a ton about her life, at least that I could find. But she was a Christian, and she was had a growing, successful kind of music career. This was over 100 years ago. And as things were going great, she was following Jesus, but then all of a sudden she was struck with a disease that caused her to go blind. Maybe you'll actually just read it. Then a tragedy struck that would have a life-altering effect. She was diagnosed with an affliction that would result in blindness. Her husband, unable to cope with that reality, abandoned the marriage, leaving her to cope on her own. What might have been a debilitating experience physically as well as emotionally only turned her more completely to God and to her most compelling vocation, the composing of hymns from the depths of her heart and life experience. She authored around 500 hymns, lyrics, and music, many in circulation to this day. And when asked, "How are you?" her frequent reply was, "I'm fine in the things that count." In experiencing blindness and then her core relationship leaving her, I can't imagine the turmoil that created in her life. But I think this lady knew something. And I think she knew what John was trying to get at about this picture of Jesus. Because in experiencing physical blindness and gut-wrenching personal life situations, Helen penned the words, "Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace." Jesus, let that be true for us today. Let's sing this once together. Oh, turn your eyes upon Jesus. We look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace.